Hi guys, it's Dragonis. Today I'm going to show you how I make these surreal 3D artworks in Blender. We'll go through the process of me making one from scratch, and I'll break down some of the thought process and techniques I use when making these. You're free to download these if you want. So yeah, just join my Discord server, ping me, and I'll send these to you. Now let's get started and make one from scratch. This is not a beginner's tutorial for learning Blender, but you have to know how to navigate the software already. First, delete the damn default cube. And I like to make my workspace kind of like these three sections. So one is going to be the shader editor. And then one is going to be for the camera. And of course, if you have like two monitors, it's a lot easier. So you can just go up here, window, and then new window. Now, I'm just going to presume you have one. So this is how it's going to be. So for the camera settings, I have it at 1080 by 1350. Now, for cover artworks, you should have 2000, at least 2000 by 2000. Or if you have a good computer, you can go 3000 by 3000. And then very important thing is that you have this GPU compute enabled. And if you don't, you can go to preferences and system and just like check what kind of GPU you have and just check it here if you have an optics or AMD. For the sampling, I have 128 samples in the viewport, and then for the render, I either have 512 or 1024. I usually do not enable denoise because it doesn't look good in the final render. Okay, I just enable screencast keys down here so you can see what exactly I'm pressing. I'm gonna make the camera reset it to 0 and I'm gonna rotate it on the x-axis for 90 degrees. I'm gonna add a plane. I'm gonna press S5 to scale it. Now, a fun thing you can do, you can click on this camera, you can go up here in the view, you can go to navigation, you can go walk navigation and right click, change shortcut, and Shift F. And now, when you go to the camera view, you press Shift F, you can sort of walk the camera like you would in a first-person shooter. So yeah, this is very good for getting good camera placements that you want, rather than just dragging the camera left and right. Now, remember to save this brand file, because if you crash, you don't have this saved, or you're done for, bro. You're done. Blender has really good autosave functions, so if your computer ever crashes, you can go here, recover, and autosave it. And you can most likely find your original file right before you crashed. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to make those crystal shapes. And there's quite a few ways. I want you to experiment yourself. I'll show you a few techniques. So the first one I copied from this tutorial. It's really great. I recommend watching the original tutorial, but I'll break the general idea down so you can understand what exactly I'm doing. So now you have this long cube. Go to edit mode by pressing tab. And I want you to loop cut by pressing Ctrl R. Mouse wheel up to make more loop cuts, and just left click, right click. Great. Now press 3 to go to face select mode. Press on the front face and S0 to scale it. Down here there's a resize. Click on proportional editing and just increase the size. Now go back here as well and press S0 and same thing. Now don't do it as harshly. Okay, great. Now we're gonna go into the modifier tab. I'm gonna add a simple deform. Now you can sort of twist it. You can also add a Bezier curve like this, and here add modifier curve, and then curve object to the Bezier curve. Now this object sort of follows the curve as it goes along. Press numpad 3 and go into edit mode again. Press A to select everything and Shift D to duplicate. Now you can see we can sort of twist this thing around. That's what we really want. Left click to accept, and then do it again over here. And then you can press L while hovering over this other mesh, and you can duplicate again. And then here as well. And that's how you get this insane looking spiral. Now we're gonna delete this curve modifier, hide the curve, and we can subdivide this, subdivision surface, and then shade smooth. Now I'm gonna take this to original scene, RY90, and scale it. Actually, I'm gonna scale up the plane here, so S5 again, and just move the camera with the Shift F. And then just get an interesting angle. Like this, great. I'm gonna make a new material. And now this is the interesting part, because the material is pretty much everything. Gonna go into render view, and now you're not gonna see anything. That's fine. Go into the world settings here. Turn down the lights. Okay, great. Now take a mix shader. Take a glass shader. Press Shift A. Glass shader. And then I'm gonna Shift A, take an emission. And then the most important one is Shift A, layer weight. Gonna plug in the facing to the factor to get color ramp. And now we can change the emission. Plug the emission below here and the glass on top. Now just mess with the color ramp. You'll get this interesting looking material. You can also mess with the layer weight until you get what you want. Now the fun part is you can mess with the colors. Now you can take a noise texture, which is usually not something that's done for colors too much. You can make the scale a bit less, then detail, lower the detail. Increase the strength a bit. Decrease the roughness. Just find a sweet spot. Shift A, you can add a hue saturation. Make it more saturated. And yeah, this is how you can get a much more interesting color combination for this glass shader. Again, just tweak the color ramp. That's pretty much it for this spiral-like object. So a fun thing I did in this picture is that I put the spiral sort of inside this glass bubble. And like you can do that as well. Essentially Shift A and add a UV sphere. Scale it up. Shade smooth. Add a glass, BSDF. You can add some subdivision to it as well. And then scale down the spiral so it fits inside. Make sure this is right in the center. Scale up the Z-axis. You can really get some crazy results just with like testing and experimenting. And also if you go to the edit preferences and search for cell fracture. Now if you enable this, you can select the cell and press F3, cell fracture. Here there's a lot of options. What we're gonna do only is just turn up the noise and recursion to like 2. Press OK. And now it's gonna break this glass apart. And this is kind of CPU intensive, so if you don't have a good laptop, I wouldn't recommend doing this. I'm gonna scale this down a bit, and then we can go up here, transfer pivot point, individual origins, and just scale down these cells. And you can mess around with it as well by just getting the same mix shader set up, the emission. And perhaps it's actually better if we don't have like a noise texture inside and just have like a solid color. So definitely mess around with it however you want. This is just one way to make this interesting crystal object. So another interesting shape you can make is this kind of pillar. This is actually not very complicated at all, and I'll show you how to make it. So I'm going to select all these and just hide these. Make a new collection. I'm going to Shift A and add a cylinder. Make the vertices 6 and scale it on the Z-axis a bit. Go to edit mode, select the top face and scale it down a bit. Now go to the modifiers and select subdivision surface. Make it simple. And levels viewport and render both are 6. We're gonna get a displace modifier. We're gonna get a new. And in the image movie, we're gonna select Voronoi. Now coloring from intensity to position. You see we get these interesting shapes. And now you can just really just play around with the size as you want. It's really up to you. And also here the strength as well. You can play around with it. Scale this up. You can still go to edit mode and edit the top face. That's pretty much that. We're gonna do the same material setup that we used before. And this looks absolutely sick. I'm gonna Shift D, duplicate this, and I'm gonna hide the original. I'm gonna apply the subdivision surface and I'm gonna apply the displace modifier. F3 self fracture. Go to transform pivot point, medium point. And then back to individual origins, scale it down, scale it up on the Z-axis, scale it down a bit more. Yeah. You can move individual pieces here and there. What you can also do is add a color ramp here between the hue saturation. Go to HSV from RGB mode and select 2 colors that you want. Make this far. And now you can have sort of a gradient transition between 2 colors that you want. Mess with the hue saturation again. So just another way to control the colors that you want for the crystal. I'm going to make a floor, make the base color pretty much black, and add a noise texture. Plug that into the roughness. Color ramp. Increase the detail and the scale. Now you can see there's some parts that are smoother and then some parts that are rougher here, down here on the floor. You can use the color ramp to adjust it. How much of the rough part you want and how much of the smooth part you want. We're also gonna add a character. So for getting a character in your scene, you can go to Adobe Mixamo. So for this scene, I just got this model and I just downloaded it as a FBX file. Went to Blender and imported it as an FBX. It's perfect here. Now it's in a T-pose. You can click on the armature here, go to the top left and go to pose mode. Now you can click on the individual bones and modify it as you want. Now we don't need anything complex. I'm just gonna put the arms down. I see that there are keyframes here, so you might want to delete these keyframes here in the animation tab. So anyway, I think that's pretty good. You can adjust now the focal length of the camera as you want. Lastly, before this is actually done, I think I'm going to add some fog. So I'm going to add a cube, scale it on 50, new material, Shift A, volume scatter, plug it into volume, unplug the surface and make the density 0.01 or a little bit more, 0.05. Okay, that's a bit too much, maybe 0.03. And then mess with the anisotropy a bit. Not sure how to pronounce it. Then increase the strength of the emission. Okay, this looks great. I like this a lot. And yeah, we'll just hit the render. Okay, now this is done. We're actually gonna go to the Compositing tab and have this insane node set up, but let's ignore that for now. And all I want you to focus on is having a viewer node here. So here you have to, first of all, select use nodes and then Shift A, viewer node. I'm gonna plug this image here. If it's too large, you go to the right here and zoom out. Okay, great. Now I want you to add a lens distortion node. So Shift A, lens distortion. And we're gonna put the dispersion to 0.025 and then distort it on 0.01. Adds a little bit on like a nice fringe effect. Next, we're gonna have a color balance here, although we don't necessarily need this. It's just good to have. You can mess around with the low, mids, and high tones of the artwork. We're also gonna add a glare node. We're gonna make this from streaks to fog glow and turn down this threshold a bit. And yeah, I think that's great. So this is the render result, and this is the one that's being composited. Alright, so we're in Photoshop with the render image. We're just gonna do some tweaks. There's quite a lot of things you can do, but I think the most important thing is I like to add some extra detail to the image after it's done rendering. So here I have this smoke brush. I'll link this in the description. And yeah, I just like to paint over the image with it. Just make sure the opacity isn't like at 100%. And then you go into the blend mode, you select screen, and you just lower the opacity as much as you want. Then I'll take a bigger brush with less hardness and start sort of erasing the parts that we don't necessarily want. And then you can make another layer with a different color, just a tiny bit different. Maybe down here a bit. I also like to add a screen layer, so something like this, and then just make it screen. Lower the opacity, makes the crystal kind of shine a bit. At the end you can add a brightness and contrast adjustment layer to bring back the contrast. I also like to add just overlays, dust overlays on these images. And this color isn't exactly correct. We can go to adjustment, take hue saturation, and we can clip this to the layer below and just adjust it until it sort of fits. Then just erase the parts on the lower dust overlay that we don't necessarily want. You can always add a few extra overlays. Just make sure the blend mode is screen. In the adjustment layers, I am going to add curves and probably color balance. I'm also gonna add a color lookup. Now for the curves, you can try auto, and it doesn't always look nice, so just like mess around with it until you get a decent look for the artwork. I'm actually gonna go back to the screen smoke overlay and delete down here because it sort of hinders the character. Also for the dust overlay as well, like that. Great. With the color balance, again, you can just try mess around a bit, get a sort of color combination that you want. And it's not always necessary either. You can lower the opacity to have somewhere in between. Finally, I have this color lookup, and this is very interesting. It sort of mimics the look of old cameras. So you can get whichever filter you want, and then you can try these different modes. I think the hue one is interesting. So you lower the opacity, and then you just try, see if you can find a nice look for it, for the cover art. And if not, you can try other blend modes like overlay or screen. And once you're done with the edits, you can press Ctrl-Shift-Alt-E. Now it's going to combine all the layers. We're gonna go to up here, filter, camera raw filter. And now we can do some final edits here as well. Here it's really up to you what you want. There's the auto option. Now this thing isn't always accurate, but I think this looks kind of nice. I'm just gonna lower all these options. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This was the original render, and this is the final edits with Photoshop. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe, and do join the Discord server. Feel free to ask any questions. I'll always be hanging around there. Thanks for watching, and see you guys in the next video.